Are you a film fan who loves the ultimate home video experience? Look no further than The Disconnected. Your host, Ryan Verrill, is your go-to source for the latest and most accurate information on home video releases, exclusive interviews with industry insiders and filmmakers, and has established a thriving community where every film and physical media enthusiast feels welcome. From hidden gems to blockbuster hits, The Disconnected brings you insider knowledge and a welcoming space to share your love of cinema. Watch every Thursday night at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific for the live announcements show and follow The Disconnected on social media to stay updated. Subscribe to The Disconnected on YouTube or on the podcast provider of your choice and dive into a world where every movie night is an adventure.
The audio commentary. It's a dying art form, but here at One Track Mind, your wonky yet affable host Ryan Luis Rodriguez, analyze film through the prism of these embryonic forms of podcasting, one audio commentary at a time. Masterpieces, crapster pieces, live action, animation, cult classics, films literally no one has ever heard of. No track is too small and no track is too big. Join me and my guests from the entertainment world as we keep these features alive every other Tuesday. Hey, who else is going to discuss Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey one week and Citizen Kane the next? Us, that's who. Sure, you have to put up with my voice, but there's a certain give and take in this industry. That's One Track Mind, part of the Someone's Favorite Productions family and available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello and welcome to Tumbleweeds and TV Cowboys. My name is Hunter. In this podcast, I'll be joined by a different guest each week to discuss a classic Western movie or TV show. I've been a fan of classic Westerns for as long as I can remember, and in recent years, they've become very nostalgic for me. I love the aesthetic, the tropes, and I love seeing different filmmakers' takes on them. At their best, they're incredibly entertaining, rewatchable, and some of my all-time favorite movies are Westerns. We'll mostly focus on Western movies made in Hollywood, but we'll also be covering spaghetti Westerns, and one thing I'm very excited to get into are Western TV shows. I've got some amazing guests coming on the show, film professors, historians, and podcasters. And Tumbleweeds and TV Cowboys is part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network, and many guests on the show will be from other shows on the network. Thanks for listening.
There are countless stories in the city about the lives lived here, about how the fates of others intertwine with our own in ways we can never expect or predict. I'm a reporter. This is my job, to see, to understand. But there are stories behind these stories, stories about terrors I've only begun to train my eyes to see. I've learned this scene carries a heavy burden. Because once open to the darkness, our eyes can never be closed again.
That was the voice of reporter Perry Reed in the case we're calling What's the Frequency Kolchak. It was the 10th and final episode of The Night Stalker, which was released, or as we like to say around here, dumped unceremoniously onto iTunes March 17th, 2006. I am joined, of course, by my regular co-host, well, he's only regular when he eats a lot of bran, Mr. Chris Dashew.
And a 1, and a 2, and a 3, bum. What's the frequency, Kolchak? That's all I can think of. It just sounds like a goddamn song.
It is a song, almost, an R.E.M. song. And also joining us on this episode is Mr. Richard Hatem.
I've been dragged here against my wishes by Chris.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything other than that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you're owning it. With all of the talk of the new Night Stalker, I had never watched a single episode, had never intended to, and now I can no longer say that I'm no longer a virgin. It's so much easier to make fun of something when you have no experience of it. I mean, I exclusively mock things I've never seen, because once you see it, then you, in a weird way, you're sort of invested. I mean, I don't know, or I get into a place of, oh, I see what they're trying to do, because you have to realize I've worked with ABC. I swear to God, I worked with those people, the studio executives that they were dealing with when this show was being done. I did a show for ABC before this, and I did a show for ABC just a couple of years after this. So I know the experience they were going through when they were doing it. And even watching the episode, I was like, oh boy, I can almost read the network notes scrolling by at the bottom of the screen.
So, spoiler alert, this is my favorite episode of Night Stalker 2005.
Spoiler alert for me, for me, just kind of another episode. I mean, let me put it this way. It's okay. I think you're right, Mike. This is kind of top of the pile for this show, because most of the other episodes have been...
It's interesting that we're going all the way back to the beginning of the series, and we are having invisible monsters again.
And mythology.
Well, kind of mythology.
Right?
That's a question I have for you guys, because even not having seen the other episodes, usually you can watch an episode, or I can watch an episode of a show and go, oh, clearly this is referring to stuff they've talked about before, or this is a big payoff. Clearly this meant something to those who are following along that it may not mean as much to me because I haven't been filled in, but I get it. This is a big payoff. But I was a little bit unclear if this episode was providing any of that. Did they know this was the final episode? Were they trying to do that?
No, they did not know this was the final episode, and we're not 100% done with Carl from 2005, 2006, because there were 2 more episodes, and fortunately, they released those scripts on the DVD release of this, so we will be talking about those 2 scripts, including the one that they readapted for one of the X-Files reboot episodes. So we're not 100% done with Kolchak reboot.
Got it. Okay, so they thought they were doing maybe a full 13 episode order.
Yeah, and then I'm not sure when they got told they're not doing any more, but I don't think that this doesn't wrap up the series whatsoever. And for me, and feel free to argue with me, Chris, because I know you love to do it, this doesn't add to mythology whatsoever. This feels like a, what do you call it, a bottle episode?
The mythology stuff that they bring up in this episode is just that, like, oh, this is the thing you've always wanted to know, Kolchak, because I'm the monster that's going to give you what you want. And, like, I'm just a trickster monster that's giving you your deepest desires. So it's not really the mythology. You're right. But they bring up the mythology because they bring up Kolchak's dead wife, which is mythology. Just for this show, that is the show's mythology, is the whole thing with Kolchak's wife and how did she die, and the mark of Cain or whatever they're going for, that thing that they really touched on like once and then never brought up again.
I mean, as far as I know, that is the core mythology. I mean, that's the equivalent of Mulder's sister, right? So it's the mystery of how his life, which by the way, so, I mean, again, spoiler alert, 14 years later, but one of the weird parts of the episode was that there was a scene, 2/3 of the way through, where it looked like the implication was that the person, I know we haven't really set up the episode, but the person, who was the antagonist of the episode, it appeared that, it was being hinted that he was the murderer of Kolchak's wife. At least I thought that's what they were trying to say, but then Kolchak's behavior didn't necessarily, he didn't immediately, react to that information. Did anyone else feel that way?
I didn't get that he murdered the wife. It sounded like he was in the same insane asylum and he heard about the wife, but I didn't get the implication that he killed the wife.
No, he heard about Kolchak talking about it, right?
But I didn't get the inference as far as oh yeah, and he had also killed her. But yeah, you're right. We should probably set this up a little bit better. We have this cold open of this guy getting pushed down a hallway in a wheelchair, and there's something at the end of the hallway, and he's very upset about it, and the guy who's pushing him is a little off balance, and then that's our cold open. And like I said, Perry gets the VO. That's the first time in this entire series that she gets the VO at the beginning and at the end. It's the same kind of horse shit that we've talked about before with the way that Kolchak does the VOs with the words on the screen and all this kind of stuff. I'm not sure why she did it, unless Stuart Townsend just wasn't available at this point. Maybe, I don't know.
That's one of the frustrating things is that, again, seeing that part, I knew, oh, this is different, because I know you guys have talked about how it's always obviously Kolchak doing the narration. And I thought, oh, well, now that she's doing it, it'll be an episode that's from her point of view. And then it wasn't. That's all you could possibly infer from, oh, she's doing it. Now this is her journey. We're going to see the world through her eyes instead of Kolchak. He'll be involved. So I was like, oh, interesting. And then that did not happen at all. I'm not even sure she was super clear on really what happened. By the end of the episode, I'm like, well, she kind of is still in the dark.
To be fair, I was kind of in the dark as to what happened as well, because you clearly see her show up at the house.
But that's not really her, I don't think.
But is it in their minds? Or is it in their minds? It's an invisible goddamn monster.
Let's talk about that in a moment.
Yeah,
you're jumping the gun here.
But the thing about Perry, the thing that you do mention about Perry is that she's not in the episode very much. But let's be honest here. I'm glad it wasn't focused on her, because her character has been woefully underdeveloped in this show anyways.
Well, this could have been an opportunity for her, though.
Sure, no, fair.
It felt like, oh, okay. So now we're gonna get, start filling that bucket a little bit, so that clearly the Kolchak bucket isn't ringing anyone's bell too hard. So let's do the other one. But go ahead with more of the recap of actually what happens in the episode.
So we have the VO. We rejoin the story. And we've got Kolchak working on a missing persons case. It's kind of late at night. And Perry starts talking about this birthday party, which I don't know if he was actually invited and forgot, invited and didn't want to go, or just never invited. But it sounds like he might go, maybe. But anyway, she leaves the story. She's off in her own thing. That's where we see Jane. Eventually we'll see Vincenzo, not at the birthday party, but after. And then Kolchak, there late at night in the office, gets a visit from this, again, rather unhinged guy who's played by Pat Healy. And what's his character's name? Paul, I think? And Paul thinks that Kolchak is sending him a code through the articles that Kolchak has written throughout this entire series. So here I was thinking, okay, now we're going to tie together some of this stuff. It's going to be like the end of the first season of Fringe, where they start to tie all of these disparate cases together and bring them all together. But unfortunately, Paul's kind of a lunatic. He kidnaps Kolchak, and then we spend pretty much the entire rest of the episode in Paul's house, and him talking with Kolchak. It's almost like a two-man play of these two guys in this little room, and there's potentially a monster at the end of the hall. And of course, as I say that, I keep thinking about Grover. There's a monster at the end of this book. So we're going to talk about that monster, which is called the Old Man. So it sounds like Paul's got a lot of father issues, and he has been dealing with this or not dealing with this for a long time. And he lives a very weird existence. Like, the only thing in his main room is a toilet, and then stacks and stacks of newspapers, because it seems like he is very obsessed with all of the codes that he is picking out of the newspapers. And I should also say that the name of this episode, What's the Frequency Kolchak, it's a reference to Dan Rather, and that he was attacked by a guy on the street years ago who just kept saying, Kenneth, what's the frequency? Kenneth, what's the frequency? And was beating Dan Rather all the time while he was asking that. And then that kind of entered into pop culture, being the REM song. And then I read a great conspiracy theory book years ago that was trying to tie in Dan Rather being in Dallas 1963 with this Kenneth, what's the frequency? And it gets into real murky territory, but it was pretty great.
Yeah, and that guy apparently who attacked Dan Rather, he thought that NBC was putting out some sort of, or he thought the news networks or the networks were putting out, it's kind of a, common delusion. They were putting out a signal directly to him, and he wanted that signal to be turned off, and he needed to know the frequency. So he attacked Dan Rather to find out what that frequency was so he could stop these messages beaming into his head. Later on, like 10 years later, that guy killed an NBC employee, like a security guard, because he was trying to break into NBC. He was still plagued by that same delusion and actually murdered a guy. So, I mean, it's a pretty dark ending to that.
So it's perfect for a pop song.
It's like, hey man, nice shot, right? About Bud Dwyer killing himself on live TV.
Which I always thought was about Kurt Cobain, but I just recently read the Bud Dwyer thing.
Which is somehow way worse.
Yeah.
Way, way, way worse. Just like the conclusion to that story that Richard just... Oh my God.
Again, having only heard about the show and then finally watching it, it's pretty clear that this incarnation of the Night Stalker is preoccupied, like really preoccupied with that sort of, like really Chris Carter kind of level of almost millennium style. The world is an existentially horrible place, and there is no solution to the mystery other than more horror and darkness. I mean, that's definitely the feeling I got from this episode, and I kind of assume that's the other episodes also.
I'd like to point out here that Richard just mentioned Millennium, a TV show that no one has mentioned in 2019. Might one even say people don't even know that show existed, except for the crossover episode from the X-Files.
Lance Henriksen will remind you about that if you ever talk to him, because he's still waiting for the movie.
He'll also remind you when you talk to him that he hates puppets and loves making pottery. If he could do that for a living, he would. I like how we both spoke to Lance Henriksen, Mike, and neither one of our interviews are even close to being this. Neither one of them touched on anything close to similar. What do you think about on a daily basis? How much I hate puppets and pottery. And hopefully a Millennium movie coming soon.
He's got this idea of making a pot and then have it basically fired by the fires of the mushroom cloud that will strike near his home, and then it turns into a beautiful pot after the entire rest of the world has gone to ash.
That's astounding.
Yes.
You're right, Richard. That's the thing that we've talked about multiple times on this podcast, is that this show, this, like you said, incarnation of Kolchak is just the X-Files. Even down to the fact that they pair Kolchak with a female character who is a skeptic and he's a believer. And there's a Skinner-esque character in Tony Vincenzo. I mean, not really as much as Skinner, because Skinner was almost in every episode of the X-Files and later on in the run. And, that formula worked for the X-Files because you had really charismatic leads in Duchovny and Anderson. And there was actual chemistry, like palpable, tangible chemistry between the two. And again, like we said before, there isn't in this show. Stuart Townsend, it's not his fault entirely any more than it's Gabriel Union's fault, but they don't have any chemistry. And you know what? This is the last actual episode of the show we're going to be watching. And you know what? I think, Mike, you and I can walk away and say that never changed.
Just having the benefit of seeing only this episode, there is that one scene, which then we are told is clearly imagined by Kolchak, where she comes and tries to help him. And of course me, and I think maybe any viewer, just sort of looking for humanity, looking for a human connection, a relationship to root for. I was sort of like, oh, okay. Oh, I see where this is going. They work together I get that Kolchak is a lone wolf. He's doing his own thing. She clearly has some heart. And now this is a moment where they're connecting. Oh, okay, great. And I was really excited about that until what happened right afterwards. And then until I found out that it probably wasn't real.
Which it wasn't real. I mean, again, I don't know how to process what ends up happening in the later part of this episode, because what Pat Healy is talking about at the beginning of the episode ends up not really factoring into anything. There's like a weird body horror nod where it's like, I cut off my toe to get rid of the old man. It's like, what? What this feels like is, and we've talked about this on other episodes of the show and on other episodes of other shows that we're on, this is a good idea that ends up going nowhere and ends up being too scattershot for its own good. It's like when you and I talked about antiviral, Mike. It's like, how many good ideas can you throw at the wall? You need to pick one or two, and don't try to go for the full spectrum of just bizarre shit to throw at the screen.
When you have an episode like this, the expectation, when a guy is clearly crazy, usually a character like that is used as, you know, almost a non-human way to inject theme. You know, it's like this person, because they're crazy, doesn't have to follow any rules, doesn't have to have like a motivation that we're like, he's not committing the perfect crime. He's just crazy. So the purpose he ends up serving in a show like this usually is, I'm going to magically speak your heart. It's kind of like what Chris was saying earlier. Like, I'm going to be a straight shot into Kolchak's soul. And so this is going to be a way to reveal to the audience Kolchak's greatest hopes, dreams, fears, in a way that feels like you arrive at something. And that you could not arrive at in any other reasonable way, because Kolchak's involved in a crazy world, so only a crazy person could speak any truth to that. I guarantee that was the expectation probably when they wrote it, and probably for anyone watching it was, we're not going to get anything that makes sense, so at least we'll get the big thematic truths of the show that haven't come yet. And I don't think we got that, did we?
The thing that I wonder about with this show, because look, we will never truly know what the potential of this show was going to be, because like you said, Richard, you can see the writing from the studio kind of on the wall. When we talked to Frank Spotnitz, what seems like, Mike, forever ago, he's said as such about the show that there was studio meddling, and what we'll never know is what this show could have been or what this show was before it was turned into a cheap X-Files knockoff. But the spark, the seedling of an idea, like you said, Richard, is there for chemistry between the two of them. It's too little too late. It's really too little too late. This is the last episode. And again, like you said, Mike, they didn't know, but you're 13 episodes in. Like, come on.
And the weird part is the beginning, her beginning narration is all about how, you know, when, you know, there's darkness behind darkness, and then when you see it, you can't unsee it. Again, which implies that she is going to witness something that she's never witnessed. And it seems to be, or about to be, paid off when she joins him in this monstrous place and then gets shot. And, you know, when you're writing the episode as you're watching it and imagining various outcomes, you're thinking, oh my God, so the final scene of this episode will probably be Kolchak, and she's in the hospital and he's standing by her bed. And she's like, what the fuck was that? What happened? And he's kind of like, yeah, honey, welcome to the party. I'm dealing with this shit all the time. And if you love me or you want a relationship with me, you know, it got my wife killed. It's, you know, it almost got you killed. That's the challenge of being Carl Kolchak's girlfriend. And then the question becomes, oh, so how is this relationship going to develop if that's the case? Which could have been cool.
Well, anything is better than Jane McManus dancing at the party with those other people, right?
Yeah, that was the most depressing party I've ever seen.
That was a pretty bad party, yeah.
Yeah, Kolchak's lucky he got kidnapped, right?
He had the better night overall.
I think so.
The way you have this show end, if they had known the show was ending, is you have Perry Reed murdered. Kolchak goes on, and he devotes himself more to finding whatever.
Yeah, but that would be tough because, I mean, don't you need to have some investment in that relationship for that murder to me? It's like the wife's murder is nothing but, okay, we just need to set up, context. But I mean, the joke about the X-Files is people really did tune in to watch that relationship. And they didn't they fed that relationship less than you feed a cactus. And people still were so into it.
This episode had moments for me. Real good jump scares, like when Paul's caseworker shows up, Mr. Kim, and when Paul shows up and zaps him with a taser, a rudimentary taser. I was like, okay, hey, this guy's going to come. He's going to, I know that this is coming, but it still was just like, get out of there, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And then when Carl's got a thermographic camera for whatever reason.
What?
Maybe he just carries it around with him. And when he gives it to Paul and he's like, oh, go ahead, look at the end of the hallway and you'll see nothing. And then when he holds it up and there's an actual shape there, it's just like, oh shit, now it's on. So I was like, okay, these are some real good moments here. Like I said, this is my favorite episode of this show, but that doesn't mean very much because the rest of these episodes have been so poor. So it's just like, this is like a good trip to the doctors. You still have to go to the doctors, but at least like you didn't have to get a rectal exam or something.
What is it our friend Father Malone always says? The world's tallest midget?
Yeah, there you go. Well, okay, so let me circle back to something that you questioned before, which again seems like pretty low-hanging fruit, but still it was too high for the world's tallest midget. In the first scene where we're in the newsroom, the office where Kolchak works with Perry, she comes by, she mentions, okay, they're throwing me this party, and everyone knows about it. And Kolchak's like, I don't know about it. And she's like, no, it's okay. I know. You don't have to keep the secret. And he's like, no, I really don't know about it. I actually thought that was really cool because I thought the joke was they literally didn't invite him. But then later on you find out that they did invite him, which then not only made it like less fun to go, oh my gosh, Kolchak is such an outsider that they don't even invite him to this party. But it also made it, well, no, they did invite him. And he's either insisting they didn't or he's insisting they didn't so he doesn't have to go, which then seems weird because it's like, well, dude, that's kind of throwing cold water on whatever relationship I'm hoping for here. And then the third weird part of all of that was he doesn't appear to be doing anything in office. He doesn't even have a story like, oh, I'm waiting for an important call. Or I'm meeting someone, or there's a reason I'm here. He's literally bouncing a ball off the window. He's not he's not engaged in anything. So I was confused by all of that.
I thought for sure, okay, this guy is creepy as fuck. Let's not invite him. So I was really hoping that it was going to be more of that social outsider kind of a thing.
I mean, at least that plays into his character. That would have been cool. But tell me, who's the dude at the party, though? The dude who was talking to Perry. Is that a guy? Is that a regular in the show?
Yeah, that's Jane McManus.
He is their roving photographer.
Imagine a character that's woefully underdeveloped, yet one episode they pretend to kill him off.
And we're supposed to care about that.
Which we don't.
Well, I was going to say, are we supposed to like him, or is he like comic relief, or what role does he play in the show?
You kind of just mentioned all of it.
Like, he's almost as Shaggy, but not as endearing, and he doesn't eat as much.
The character you're missing that is good is Alex Nyby, which is unfortunate because Eugene Bird as Alex Nyby is actually one of the better aspects of this show.
And he only was on, what are we saying, 3 episodes?
And what does he do? What's his deal?
He worked at the morgue.
Oh, okay. Okay. It is funny how there's sort of the parallels to the old show. Like he's the John Fiedler.
Yeah, he was not Gordy the Ghoul by any stretch of the imagination. He was actually
Gordy the
more
Ghoul.
helpful to Kolchak.
Right.
I mean, I've gone around with Chris about this as far as, is Jane completely superfluous? And I always come around to the point of, yes, I don't think that he really needs to be there. Because he's more like, we've talked about this before as far as, like, Perry takes turns with him as far as being the damsel in distress.
And neither one, because they've split essentially what could be one character into two characters, neither character is very well developed. Because, like, that could be one character, theoretically, right, Mike? I don't think I'm, like, really stretching on that one, but Jane McManus, now here at the end of the show, kind of a post-mortem of what we've seen, Jane McManus and Perry Reed could have just been one character.
Having not seen the pilot episode of the more modern version, did it feel like in that pilot episode, like, did it feel like, oh, it's like they obviously want this character to be a particular thing, but it just never ended up happening? Like, oh, clearly he's the goofy friend, but then, oh, I guess not. I mean, was there anything like that going on?
Was Jane even in the first episode of the show?
I'm pretty sure he was there in that garage when they first meet Kolchak, who's already beat them to the scene, and he calls him by the wrong name or something. Like, Jane calls Kolchak by the wrong name. I'm pretty sure he was there, and somebody for Perry to have, like, as an ally against Kolchak, and that's kind of that same role that he's played. But then he's kind of, to fill you in a little bit more, Richard, he's gone back and forth, and he's mostly swung over to Kolchak's side, where it's just like, okay, yeah, you're saying it's monsters, then it's probably monsters. Let's go look for the monsters. But he doesn't even have that, like, that passion or anything where he wants to, be the new monster hunter, and, like, he's like, he's nowhere near Mutt from Constantine or something. He's not like, oh, I want to be the next monster hunter.
And he's not even the lone gunman from the X-Files. He's just kind of there.
He's there. He is definitely there.
Just like, oh, by the way, Richard, let's also point out again, since we're kind of now just talking about the show, Vincenzo, yet another woefully underserved character in this version of the show. But hey, you got to actually see him in this episode, which I think is the first time in like 3 episodes. So
yeah, he doesn't like to show up very often.
And that was weird too. Yeah, that was a weird little moment with him because, again, he didn't. It's like at a loss for doing anything else. They just have people continue to echo the "you don't understand the darkness that Kolchak lives with," kind of party line, which feels like that's kind of what Vincenzo was saying. Like, whatever he was saying in this episode, it just felt like it was just reinforcing this notion that Kolchak's a dark guy in a dark world. And, the end. Instinctually, I'm like, well, in the other show, Vincenzo was the, nemesis antagonist. He wasn't the monster, but he was the real life person saying, Kolchak, you're wrong. And then Updike was like, I'm like, oh, so is James McManus sort of, was he starting out like the Updike, or I guess not, or he's not even the Marmelstein?
Speaking of Monique Marmelstein.
Wow, yeah, good callback.
A certain someone may have sent us a certain signed picture by a certain Monique Marmelstein.
Well, you guys have an admirer, out in the podcast first.
Down at the Warner Brothers lot.
just put it on the pile with all the other gifts you get from your listeners.
Boy, that is a pile of one.
Be careful, Chris. You might die under the pile.
The pile may collapse on me. I think the thing about this show is, we've had some interviews where we've talked to folks like Frank Spotnitz, like Eugene Bird. Their hearts were in the right places, but it failed in spite of. I mean, look, it was a good idea, but at the same time, I still kind of question remaking a show that was essentially made a lot better 20 years after it came out anyways.
I think ABC executives went, okay, we own this show called The Night Stalker. It's one of our properties. And recently, a very, very humongously popular show called The X-Files was on TV. So maybe there's a way to meld those two. But the problem being, anyone tuning in for The Night Stalker isn't going to get that because there's no humor, no charm, no fun, And then anyone turning in for the X-Files is not going to get that either because they're getting a warmed over substitute. So you end up, I tell you, I feel Frank Spotnitz's pain. I listened to that interview and I'm like, yeah, he had an original idea that's like, well, maybe this is a way you really can service the character and the fans of the old show, but update it a little bit. And I think ABC was just like, no, you're X-Files guy. Just give us X-Files.
And please bring your X-Files compatriots in with you to write this episode. Vince Gilligan is credited as a writer in this episode, and we all know Vince Gilligan is a good writer. It's a disappointment. And look, I know you go on the Kolchak Facebook pages or anywhere where they talk about the show, and this show gets piled upon constantly. Almost, I wouldn't say unnecessarily because some of it is deserved, but this show gets piled upon. And some of it is deserved, but at the same time, a lot of those folks didn't even watch it.
We watched it.
We
suffered for our art.
Suffer, my children. But it's not that bad. It's really not. It's just not much of anything, to be perfectly honest.
I will say one thing, and I'd love to hear your opinions on this. Though I thought the look of the show was really ugly. Like, I just thought, what is going on? It's like super, like really brightly lit and then also extremely dark. Like, it was almost physically uncomfortable to watch. Just in terms of the X-Files was a beautiful show. I even liked the look of the original Night Stalker TV show. This was kind of unpleasant to look at. And I think, I'm going to say maybe that was because they wanted it to be jarring and jagged and handheld. But I didn't love the look of the show. What about you guys?
I can totally see what you're saying as far as, this episode in particular was very, very stark. And the lighting in Paul's place was really harsh. I kind of thought that worked in service of it, but as far as the stuff outside of Paul's place, and I don't mean outside of his actual house, but I'm talking about like the world at large. Yeah, it looks like warmed over garbage.
And here's the other thing about this show, right? We have to talk about when this show came out. The show came out in 2006. And look, Richard, you mentioned the X-Files, and the X-Files is a beautiful show until it went to LA and left Vancouver. And once it left Vancouver, the X-Files became similarly drab to this show. And this show, it feels like if you showed this show to someone and asked them, when do you think this came out? I think someone would be able to put it within a couple years of when the show aired, because it has that mid-2000s original CSI feel to it.
Yeah, you know what? Yes, that's what it looks like.
It looks like CSI, like shitty CSI.
Yeah, and yeah, camera movement for no reason, just to, keep things interesting, quote unquote. I honestly try to consciously remind myself watching this episode, I'm like, well, don't compare it to the original, because obviously it is not that. But what if you just were changing channels and landed on this show? What would you get from it? And I think that's when I arrived at that place of, wow, this is just pretty grim. This is just like really unpleasant. Poor Reggie Lee, who by the way was on Grimm when I worked on Grimm. So I was like, oh my God, there's Reggie. the 10, 5 years before, 7 years before Grimm. Look, he got work. So I was so happy to see him, and then so disturbed to literally watch him bleed out right in front of America. Like, oh fuck.
And then turn into a monster, maybe?
To your point from earlier, Richard, that is where he comes out and is trying to implicate that Paul murdered Kolchak's wife. So you were absolutely right. There is that moment in there of the implication. But yeah, Kolchak never seems to go off.
Yeah, right? Okay. I thought it was fucking crazy. I'm like, he's like, he came back with blood on him, and yeah, okay.
And what it seems like is that the old man, or whatever this creature is that is been tormenting Paul, we're supposed to think, oh, it's all in his head, and then we think, oh, well, maybe there's a creature, and then we think again, okay, maybe it's in his head, and then when Kim comes out and he's like, yeah, it's all, he tried to kill your wife or blah, blah, blah. Then it's like, okay, now is that really him? Is that something else? What's going on? Is he trying to use Kolchak in order to get him to murder Paul? And basically, yeah, that's how it goes, because then Perry shows up. And when Perry shows up, I was just like, well, that's really weird. How did she know where Kolchak was? And then she gives this excuse of, oh, I traced a call. And it's like, okay. But then when she comes into the apartment or into the house, I'm just like, what the fuck are you doing? Get the fuck out of there. And they're talking so loud in that front room. I'm like, what are you doing?
I thought the exact same thing. I'm like, what is going on? And not only that, but why is he not crazed? Why is he not like, there is a man in the next room who murdered my wife. I have found the man who killed my wife, and I'm going to go kill him. And Perry's like, no, don't do it. And I was expecting some of that, but then I'm like, well, maybe I misheard it. Maybe I was just making that up thinking that's what I wish was happening. It was confusing.
That's Stuart Townsend, though. You cannot get a rise out of Stuart Townsend. If he was ever invested in this show, he was definitely not by this point. I've never seen him even raise his voice. He's just the deadest of deadpan.
Except it was funny at the end when he grabbed him and he did the Riggs line from Lethal Weapon. He's like, you think your old man's down there? Let's go see him together.
That's the only time I've seen him emotional in this whole thing. So I was just like, wow, that's very surprising. So I think maybe that also helped kind of, push the needle up a little bit for me when it came to this episode. Like, oh shit. He's actually emotional. He's actually going to do something. He's defending Perry. Wow, this is fantastic. And he manages to murder this guy.
Yeah, it does. And that is what you want. I mean, look, you want this guy to be killed. Yeah, there's no part of it. It's just, well, no, just arrest him. I mean, it was very satisfying, horribly enough, to watch Kolchak, do what you think is throwing him to the lions, essentially, right? And yet, still unclear how that guy then ultimately died, unless he just hit the wall really hard, and then unclear how we're supposed to feel about Kolchak, his wife's murder, and his relationship with Perry, and his hallucination. So a lot of things kind of left on the table, which I don't know. Maybe those two scripts, or the reconfigured one will explain. What do you think?
I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold your breath because the likelihood is you're not going to get a satisfying conclusion.
Yeah,
Which I already thought they concluded it, right?
As far as what, with this episode?
No, the other episode, like the one where it's to the sea,
there
or
was a two-parter right in the middle of the season, which again, it's like, what the fuck are you guys doing?
I thought that they had already wrapped that up.
Yeah, The Source Part 1 and Part 2, Episode 6 and 7.
Wait, wrapped what story up?
They pretty much tried to... So we had a little bit of that mythology, the whole, like, he's got this weird mark on his wrist, and so did his wife, and so did these other people, yada yada. And they bring that up in the first episode, I think a little in the second, more in the third, maybe in the fourth, they just kind of throw it on. And then episode 6 and 7, they really go all in on the mythology. And then after that, we don't hear about it. Really, I think there was a mention of it, in 9, Chris?
Something
it seemed like there was just a real quick throwaway kind of thing. But yeah, they pretty much, they didn't wrap up the mythology, but they just were like, here's some mythology. Now we're going to go away from it. Now we're back to Monster of the Week.
The mythology, I mean, look, in the X-Files, it's there until it's not. And then, but it always feels like it's still underneath everything. In this show, it's almost like they forgot about it, like you said.
Like, did they ever help anyone in this show? Like, does he ever, like in the X-Files, they ultimately were kind of theoretically helping people. Like, okay, well, we've solved the weird murders in this town, So you kind of were, they were called into a case and then they solved it. I mean, does it ever feel like they were doing it on this show? Was that ever like a structure of an episode? Thanks, Kolchak. You helped something.
Gosh, usually they were like a day late and $1 short when it came to so many of these cases. I think they helped apprehend some people. Like, I'm thinking of Burning Man.
Which was a very generic CSI episode.
Yeah, and like the 5 people you meet in hell. Like, but you never get that warm, fuzzy feeling of like, this person's going to go off and live a wonderful life now that these people have solved this mystery.
Right. I mean, at least in the old Kolchak show, it was never warm and fuzzy, but you're at least like, well, okay, so I mean, I guess, the Moss Monster's not going to kill anyone more. That one's done with.
Yeah, and the other problem, I kind of misspoke when I said, Monster of the Week, because that was the thing with the show was there's no monsters. And this episode is typical of that as far as, I think Timeless was the last time we saw a really, like a halfway decent monster, and that was just basically a ripoff of The Night Strangler again, where it was just like, oh, this person comes out every 35 years and needs to feed. So it's like, okay, great, we've seen that.
Jeepers Creepers.
Yeah, Victor Toombs.
Yeah, oh yeah. Almost like a show that did it better.
Exactly.
Look, I think at the end of the day with this show, the thing that I really come away from this show with is a just general feeling of, I want to watch the X-Files. I essentially watch an episode of the X-Files every time I watch an episode of this to kind of remind myself of what this could have been. And then I realize that ultimately at the end of the day, we kind of, in my mind, should have silenced some of the people that were like, this is fucking garbage. It's not really. It's just watch the original show. Because the original show is better, but also the other thing is, do not pretend that the original show is perfect. Because if you're going to say how bad this show is, you also kind of have to grapple with the fact that the original show has a lot of nostalgia baked into it. And a lot of people are unwilling to, they're just like, well, the original show is great and the new show is garbage. Sounding chamber, everyone agree with me. Yes. That's kind of what it feels like.
Yeah, I totally agree, but I will say that I think part of that feeling is engendered by the fact that the original show traded so much on charm and humor and just the charm of Darren McGavin, so that it's easy to remember it fondly, because it's like oh, that was my favorite uncle, and then this was like a really scary substitute teacher who wants to murder you.
Oh no, I completely agree. I mean, the thing about the original show that is why it was so successful is because Darren McGavin is so charismatic. Look at why Supernatural's been on the air for 13 seasons. Look at why The X-Files has had 2 reboots. It's because you have people in the roles that matter, that are charismatic, that people can get behind, that people care about and like. Look at shows like, I don't know, anything. Jesus Christ, Stranger Things, any show that people watch, they like the characters because the people in the roles are charismatic and good at what they do. I'm not saying Stuart Townsend is bad at what he does, or Gabriel Union. I'm just saying they aren't in this show, and that's a bummer because it could have been like the original show. They could have really played up the charismatic nature of Kolchak as opposed to making him, like you said, Richard, Mr. Dark and Gloomy all the time.
Well, yeah, this is, obviously me arguing my taste, but when you hang your hat on dark existential nihilism and horror, I mean, I actually think that's a pretty narrow target to hit. And then even when you hit it dead on, what you've achieved is pretty cold, which is a flavor. And that's, not everything has to be, aspirational and life affirming, but that's a hard thing to hit over and over and over again and feel like you're adding up to something. Because I think instinctually people are watching a TV show looking for a long-term storytelling and a part of that long-term storytelling being the development of relationships that you get caught up in and have a stake in those relationships succeeding. And that's what gives you tension. Oh no, these people might break up or they might die or whatever. And that's easier to achieve in a way. So I think another thing you had with this show is is the result of the studio wants one thing, the network wants another thing, the people actually doing the show want another thing, and then none of those things get achieved. And what you're watching is the leftovers, what got left behind. The stuff that was so unobjectionable or that no one just had the energy to fight, okay, here's what's left. And we've all seen shows like that. And I think this is one of them, and it's like no one's fault because the studio didn't want to ruin this show. They wanted a hit. So did the network. So they all thought they were doing the right thing.
Yeah, it's that old, success has many fathers and failure has none? Or how's that go?
You know what? I'd like to point out that I was actually the one who gave Jason Voorhees his mask. Said 8 different people in the documentary about the series. But yet no one will claim responsibility for Jason Takes Manhattan being filmed in Vancouver. So, yeah, it's that same shit. It's, like you said, no one wants to take responsibility for the show being a failure. And I'm not blaming Frank Spotnitz, but someone should shoulder some of the blame other than just saying, it's the studio's invisible men on the other side of an invisible mirror. Or like a one-way mirror. It's at that. And look, I mean, Richard, you work in the industry, so you know that it's a convenient thing to blame. And honestly, a lot of people probably blame it for their own inadequacies in being able to craft a worthwhile story to tell.
What none of us have spent 5 minutes doing on this show is talking about what a shit writer Vince Gilligan is. Because, he isn't. He did good work before this. He did good work after it. So that's part of what you factor in. And again, it's personal taste, but it's like, all right, well, Frank Spotnitz did some good work before this. He did some good work after this. So we're going to assume he might not have been the number one reason that this was not successful, either financially, ratings-wise, or even creatively. And obviously, he kind of admitted it. He was like, look, this was not what I wanted. So in a way, he's saying, my aspirations were high, and this time we didn't get it. And I've been a part of a lot of those.
Well, and the thing is, I mean, like, we could even tie this into something that, Mike, you and I talk about on another podcast, The Twilight Zone 1985, when we did those bonuses about the 2019 Twilight Zone. You have Glenn Morgan on there who wrote for the X-Files. He wrote a lot of really great X-Files episodes. And then he goes on and writes some terrible Twilight Zone 2019 episodes. And again, we know he's a good writer. We've seen him write other things well. It's just these weird missteps. In this show, it just seems to be misstep after misstep after misstep. There's never a time where there was a slowing of momentum with the missteps. It seems that the missteps just continued and never stopped.
They picked up.
The same thing happens to who I feel is, probably one of the greatest writers of the 21st century, which is Max Landis. He constantly is getting undermined by the studio.
Yeah, and sexually assaulting women as well. But hey, you know what? No big deal. It's okay. On a podcast I recorded yesterday, I got to call Bryan Singer a child rapist. So we're just keeping with the theme of let's just burn it all down, light it on fire, and watch it burn.
Wow. Full circle.
Richard Hatem, not on this episode, by the way. He wants to still work in Hollywood when we're done. Chris and Mike, on the other hand, never going to work in Hollywood.
It is weird. Someone has been calling around impersonating me on podcasts, so maybe this will turn out to be one of those. I will say at the trial.
And maybe a helicopter would land on you.
Oh, God.
All
please.
Charges will be dropped mysteriously, just like in the Kevin Spacey trial.
Exactly.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, my God. Now I'm depressed. Now I'm more depressed than I was watching What's the Frequency, Kolchak.
So, Mike, since this is our last... And I know that we're going to talk again about the scripts and the X-Files episode, but I want, because I've already kind of given mine, I want to know what your kind of parting post-mortem final thought, Jerry Springer style, is on Night Stalker 2005.
Well, first off, it was not my kid, so the test came back. I'm happy about that.
But that's Maury, not Jerry Springer.
Oh, shit. Okay.
What, she want him and his chicken tetrazzini?
So... 2005 Kolchak is not as bad as people make it out to be, but it's not good. And of all the episodes, I still stand by this being the best standalone episode.
I would be inclined to agree with you.
Wow, I feel lucky that it's the only one I watched.
Yeah.
And be good to each other. No? Okay. Maybe a little too on the nose.
Let's get on to the important stuff. When do I get to come back and talk about Darren McGavin and one of those episodes?
You get to come back next month when we're back to the original run of Kolchak from 1974. We're going to be talking about, the Nightly Murders. So I'm very excited to have you back, and it'll be great. So until then, Richard, what's been keeping you busy lately?
Season 2 of Titans. We are halfway through filming. We're breaking the last handful of episodes, and we're ready to come back at you, I believe, in September on a DCU Universe subscription only in the United States, and it's on Netflix everywhere else, Canada and beyond. So, Titans is taking up my days.
And let's not forget, your show was not canceled after one season, unfortunately.
Or one
Right?
episode.
Shit. Jeez.
Oh, shit. What the hell was... I'm going to find out what happened because I think there is a story we're not hearing. No one.
You think?
No one. Well, come on. I mean, how you premiere a show and then you announce that you've canceled it before the other episodes of... Like, on what planet does that help you as a network?
The planet of DCE, the DC Universe planet. It's bizarre. It's weird. It's weird.
It got great reviews. I heard it looked great, and then I heard it was canceled. So there you go.
All kind of in the same day.
Yeah, pretty much. Anyway, that's what I'm doing. And, Doom Patrol doing well, though. So there you go.
And your show seems to be doing well.
Titans is doing well. I mean, in a weird way, it might be, one of the more talked about shows I've ever worked on, considering that, you can only watch it if you pay for it. And even then it only shows up like on your microwave oven or something.
God damn, this guy's got his own shovel and is burying his own show. What's going on here? I can watch it on my TI-83, right?
It's a great show if you can manage to see it. But people do seem to be liking it. So, yeah. And second season, this is no secret. We meet, and I wrote the episode, Superboy and Crypto.
Nice.
So, get ready for some, boy-dog action.
Boy, I'm going to be watching a video about that later tonight, so...
I think that's a special tab on
Are we still on the
Pornhub.
air?
You're talking about an American hero.
And Chris, what is keeping you busy these days, sir?
Everything and nothing at the same time. I'm doing a little podcast called the Kolchak Tapes where you can find me talking about movies with some friends of mine. Mike's on there. I need a Richard on there at some point. I think it would be beneficial. Maybe have him watch something good for once. I don't know. So so Richard doesn't think that I hate him. You're coming with us and watching Kolchak. I'm dragging you
Chris
along.
is the mean one. I think we all agree on that, man.
Yeah.
There is a good cop, bad cop vibe
Yeah.
on the show.
There is. And I don't prefer bad cop. I prefer good cop, kinky cop. So my handcuffs have feathers on them. They're like fur line. But no, you can find me on the Kolchak Cast. Mike and I also do another podcast with our friend Father Malone, where we talk about Twilight Zone 1985. That is Dreams for Sale. You can find that at twilightzone85.com. And then I do a little Tales from the Crypt podcast called Chronicles from the Crypt, and that is over at chroniclesftc.com. Where can people find you, Mike, when you're not here?
I do a podcast called The Projection Booth, which you can find at projectionboothpodcast.com. And every once in a while, I let Chris on the show, though I always wonder why.
Yeah, and don't forget, guys, just so all you original Kolchak fans are aware, 2005 is done.
That works for me.
If you look into the darkness long enough, your eyes adjust. And you start to see that there are evils in the dark. But in seeing, you learn a terrible truth. That you have not found these evils at all, but rather, they have found you.
If you're looking for more horror outside of the mainstream, look no further than Unsung Horrors, a podcast about underseen horror movies. I'm Lance.
And I'm Erica. Every other week, we'll cover a horror movie with fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. We'll even give you double feature recommendations to pair with the movies we discuss.
From gothic to shot on video, from slashers to comedies, from giallo to J-horror. We'll cover all the subgenres. So join us as we unearth these hidden gems of horror.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Unsung Horrors, available wherever you listen to podcasts. And part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Hello, filthy movie lovers. My name is Gentry Austin.
And I'm Casey Scott.
And we're the hosts of The Sin Syndicate, film podcast for something weirdos, anti-Criterion bros, and Joseph Sarno aficionados. Join us semi-weekly as we peer into the adults-only theaters and sticky-floored cinemas of the golden age of sexploitation, when the morals were loose, the laws were murky, and the intercourse was all simulated. Find us now on the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.